Okay, everyone. Hello, welcome. You are in the session with arguably the best title of the entire day today at RA in a Day. This is Utterly Unfamiliar and Downright Detestable, Reader's Advisory Beyond Your Own Tastes. We're so thrilled to bring the amazing podcast group Book Club for Masochists to RA in a Day this year. A reminder to please use the chat to ask your questions today. My fellow committee member Jeff and I will both be there keeping an eye out for your questions that we'll then ask the team at the end of the session. Michelle Arbuckle is also there if you have any sort of technical issues you need help with. Cameras are, again, completely optional for all of today's sessions. So with that, I'm actually going to turn things over to the podcast team of Megan, Matthew, RJ, and Anna. Go ahead, folks.
Hello there, and welcome to Utterly Unfamiliar and Downright Detestable, Reader's Advisory Beyond Your Own Tastes. Next slide. Oh, we're skipping the quiz?
No, it's next.
Okay, I see. Okay, first of all, who are we? I'm RJ Edwards. I work at the Vancouver Public Library in Vancouver, BC, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Stolo people.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Anna Ferry. I'm a research and learning librarian in Henderson, Nevada, USA. It's located on the traditional homelands of the Numubi Southern Paiute people, including the Las Vegas Paiute tribe and the Moapa Band of Paiutes. My apologies, today is going to be awkward for me because I am caught in a random city because I was traveling and my connecting flight was canceled, and I am about to board my flight. So I'm going to quickly do my section out of order today. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up for that. And then I got to go catch my flight.
I'm Matthew. I'm a librarian at the British Columbia Institute of Technology, which is also the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Stolo people.
My name is Megan. I'm an archivist with Library and Archives Canada, which is on the unceded and traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe. Try to keep this rolling.
Yep. So first, please go to menti.com and use this code. We are asking what genres intimidate you the most, and hopefully everything goes to plan. We'll be able to show you the results of this in just a moment. What we're going to talk about on today's is we'll be talking about who we are, what the podcast is, why we do the podcast, and then each of us will have a couple of minutes to go through a different aspect of how we learn about genres that we don't like. Is really what it is. For the podcast, we read a lot of genres that we are unfamiliar, like it said in the title, utterly unfamiliar and downright detestable. We've read a lot of books that we don't like. We've read genres that we didn't think we would like that we've turned out liking a lot. And we'll talk about some of the ways that we've used these to become more familiar with these genres. Also, the link and the code should be in the chat as well, so you can just click that. And so here it is. Megan will talk about. First, Anna is going to talk about grasping genres and identifying appeal with minimal masochism. Then Megan will talk about genre, subgenre, appeal factors, and tropes. I'll talk about formats. RJ will talk about resources for diversifying your reader's advisory. So the podcast, Book Club for Masochists, a reader's advisory podcast. I regret the name somewhat whenever someone misunderstands what masochist aspect this is. This really only comes up when people try to join our Facebook group, and I can tell when they are not our audience, our expected audience, when the other Facebook groups that they're part of are all masochist related things. And they've just searched for masochist and masochism, and they're like, oh, Book Club for Masochists, that's what I am. I'm like, oh no, you're the wrong sort of masochist. Although there is at least one dominatrix who listens to our podcast. So potentially there is overlap in that area. Megan, this is you. Yep.
Yes. So Anna and Matthew started the book club just after we had finished grad school to fill in the gaps in our RA and genre knowledge. So many of that time we're working or looking for work in public libraries in the area. We work precarious, contract, and on-call positions. So the book club was a great support line as well as continuing education opportunity as we were trying to get our professional footing in the area. The Vancouver Public Library had some brand new recording studios at the time, so starting the podcast was a fairly low barrier step. After amount of time, clearly we don't all work in public libraries anymore, but the podcast continues to be a great way of having conversations with friends and colleagues about books, genres, and formats. Scheduling still sucks, but at least it's just working around all the different time zones, usually.
Yeah, usually airports are not involved with this. So let's look at the results, and hopefully some people have been able to fill this in. Okay, this is great. Horror, romance, science fiction, inspirational. Yeah, these are definitely things that we've covered. Western, it's great to see some of the same things that we struggle with on the podcast. So thank you for filling this out. Manga, oh, I've got some suggestions for you if you struggle with that genre. Okay, so now we'll go back here, and it should be Anna is up next.
Hello, everyone. All right, so I'm talking about gasping genres and identifying appeal with minimal maximism, because sometimes words do hurt, or at least they're occasionally very intimidating when you're dealing with something you're not fully familiar with. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about how do you make it hurt a little bit less by knowing your limits, using your tools, making it productive, and making it fun. I'm going to spend the most time on knowing your limits. So next slide. So we're going to start with quitting is good, actually. Sometimes it's appropriate to quit. Really what you're trying to do is make sure that you're understanding what your goal is, and your goal is to understand the appeal. And once you've gathered what you feel like is a good sense of the appeal for that genre, you can go ahead and stop if you have found that it's still not the right thing for you. So this is not the time to be a completionist. For your materials that you read, skim, skip about, just don't finish, which is my fave and a thing I do a lot. We do this a lot on the podcast. This is how we get through these genres. But we also occasionally find that we love something. So that's why I like just don't finish, because I can start, I can go as far into it as I want. And if I find that I'm actually really kind of getting into this genre, I can keep going and have the full experience with that book. But there are great 10 and 5-minute methods from Jessica Moyer and Nancy Pearl, which you can see. I've offered links to some background materials about how these are designed, but they're about understanding the visuals of the book and then connecting those with the appeal factors for the book, and then doing quick skim reads through them where you're trying to pull out either like the doorways for Nancy Pearl or some of the key aspects of setting and character and things like that through your quick skim reading. Really what you're trying to do is spend less time with more titles in the genre, because the genres are broad. There's more boundary breaking than there is actual being in the genre most of the time. So you're trying to just figure out where different types of boundaries are for different types of readers. Next slide. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is a personal passion for me, is don't be pressured to read like other book people. Use the method that is best for you. You are your own very special kind of book or non-book person. So I bring this up because we do an annual episode that's about our goals for the year. And every year I'm like, I do not want to do this. I like notoriously just cannot, I'm so grumpy in those episodes. Because years ago, when I was an early librarian, I tried to do all of these bingos and challenges and very different, all the readathons and things like that. And it made my reading life miserable. So you've got to find the method that works for you. If the bingo works for you, if the challenge works for you, do it. But if it doesn't, don't make yourself do it just because it's the trendy way to get into reading a lot of different things. Pick the method that's best for you and pick the format that's best for you. Be careful of the hype and mythologies about being a certain type of a book person or a certain type of a reader within these reading spaces. Next slide, please. Be strategic. Why are you doing this? That is your goal. That is what you're getting to as your endpoint. So prioritize genres and authors for your community. Prioritize diversity as much as possible. We do try to do this definitely within the episode with varying mixed results in terms of how we can get access to them. But it's important because you are part of the pathway that helps your readers to explore more diversely. And then prioritize the not quite top popularity in the backlist, because if if a reader likes the genre, they've read the James Patterson in that genre. They don't need the James Patterson. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be useful for you for understanding that genre, but it's not the one that's going to help you to give them new titles to explore. Next slide, please. And then use and know your tools. And with this one, I actually want to focus particularly on the media criticism and commentary. The reason being because we kind of know we have our novelist and biblio comments and Libby. We have, announcement in the background. Use your colleagues and patrons. We know that we can use these tools, but we don't often talk about and think about the value of exploring around in media criticism and commentary and formats that are useful for you. So I like things like It's Lit from YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube. I like the Worst Bestsellers podcast for like odds and ends. There's a lot of other ones. There's one called from Ryan Hollinger that's about horror movies, and I don't watch horror movies, but I've learned so much about that genre by listening to these good critiques from somebody who loves the genre, who explores what's going on in it. So find it, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a YouTube video, whether it's somebody who puts out blogs. These kinds of media commentary and criticism are just as valuable as our regular tools. Next slide, please. All right. How do you make it productive? You juice your struggles. Oh, it's by Ryan Hollinger. I don't think he has a specific channel name on YouTube. Ryan Hollinger, responding to a chat there. Juice your struggles for all they're worth. You want to make it feel valuable, what you're going through, especially if you really are regretting like digging into that genre. So make displays out of it, make book lists out of it, do presentations at staff meetings and trainings, do events like speed dating a book or speed recommendation events where you like do, I don't know if anybody here has done one of these. This is like one of my favorite events that I used to do in public libraries, where you have a group of 4 or so librarians who are going to do book pitches, and they start with 60 seconds for the book pitch, and then they get 30 seconds, which 60 seconds is so long, it's actually hard to do 60 seconds. Then you get 30 seconds, then you get 15 seconds, and then you get 5 seconds, which is as hard as doing it at 60 seconds, but more fun. You make it fun and silly. You have big loud bells that cut people off, and everybody knows what's going on, so they're okay with the bell cutting them off. You have a moderator who's just hyping up the energy in it, and it's a really fun event. I also want to talk briefly about how we've made this productive through the diversifying genre book list that we produce. Unfortunately, the link on this slide, we haven't been able to update the page. The page is like stuck right now. But so it doesn't have quite all of our genre book lists on it, but we do one for every single episode and for our backlist episodes now as well. And RJ takes the lead on that. So this is kudos for RJ. Next slide, please. And my last thing I want to talk about is making it fun, because sometimes the pain is good, because you're exploring in new areas of reading, and that can be really fascinating. The challenges in gamification can be a lot of fun, but doing it for me personally, the most productive way, the most valuable way, and most enjoyable way is to do it with friends and colleagues. You can also make use of social media, but really the important thing is to celebrate the surprises. You will stumble across things you never thought you'd have loved that you absolutely adore. And when you do, you need to say it loud. Enjoy it, celebrate it, share it with others. All right, I think that's it for me.
Perfect. Thank you, Anna, and have a safe flight, because I think you might be boarding before this presentation ends. Also, I realized that in our struggle, we didn't actually say what the podcast was really. We every month we pick a different genre at random, and we have to read books from that genre and then discuss them. We discuss how we found those books, what we liked about those books, what the appeal factors of those books for other people. And it's unlike other book clubs in that we each read different books from that genre. So on the podcast, we're all going to be discussing, I'd say like around 4 to 6 books is usually how many we discuss on each episode of the podcast. And so it gives you hopefully it gives you a broad overview of different types of books within that area. Yes, Megan, are you up now? If you have something else to say about the podcast as well, please do that. But otherwise, we can just get into your section.
Yes, I think it's pretty clear we went hard into the alliteration here. So genuine genres and advantageous appeal factors and tantalizing tropes. Next slide, please. All right, so genre, subgenre, appeal, and trope are helpful only in so much as they are useful in a conversation around reading dislikes and desires. But in the end, they remain imperfect, kind of fuzzy concepts and categories. So like we said on the podcast, every month we discuss a genre, which means we attempt to define the genre. And I have to say, we are not always all that successful at creating strict boundaries on this. But these all matter, because otherwise, how would we talk about books at all? So that's why I'm talking about them today. So next slide, please. Here is a lovely map created by Martin Varjik of genres as countries. But like I said, the boundaries are often much fuzzier than country boundaries. So genre and subgenre. I like to think of these as big tent and smaller campground groupings of books that tend to capture things like setting, plots, moods, and in some cases, characters. There may be some expectations in terms of writing style, like literary fiction, but the first two, I think, tend to be the biggest distinguishing factors between like your space opera and your cozy mystery. So setting is key to fantasy, science fiction genres, while plots, characters give us many of the mystery subgenres. Romance would like to mix and match all of these in a fine selection of subgenres. There are so many subgenres, we dedicated a month to them. While Gothic, horror, and thriller are going to take you on a ride on the mood roller coaster with plot and setting in the mix. So these big tent subgenres give you a gateway into a person's reading habits and desires. Subgenres can help clarify the appeals, and not just the likes, but also the dislikes. So yes to military and explorer sci-fi, but no to cyberpunk and dystopian post-apocalyptic stuff. Well, we're probably looking for characters looking out into space in the future with some measure of confidence and optimism. However, keep in mind the genre conventions involved. So a romance type story without a happily ever after probably won't work for a traditional big R romance reader. Subgenre makes searching a lot easier in some ways, but trickier in others. So maybe the genre is fairly niche. Maybe it went out of style in the 80s, but sometimes you can still start to pull apart subgenre according to the classical RA appeal factors. So next slide, please. Everybody probably has already heard of novelists several times today in terms of a searching database that includes very many appeal factors. The classic ones I tend to think of as character, storyline, pace, tone, and writing style. On the podcast, we tend to go fairly broad. We ask, how does the reader of this book want to feel? What does this type of book do for them? But the classic appeals are still useful. So from Nancy Pearl, we see the characterization of the 4 doorways: story, character, setting, and language. And they're doorways because they open the conversation. So you can follow up with further questions, help clarify, define, narrow. They also give you the language to sell the book. So luscious, heartbreaking, thrilling, snappy dialogue. These are all things that will appeal to readers once you've got a handle on the kind of book that will appeal to them. Next page, please. Tropes. So for other books, tropes become part of the appeal. These 2 tweets just showed up in my Twitter feed, and they made me laugh a little bit because one person clearly, the tropes are not the appeal, the characters are the appeal. They come from a fan fiction background, whereas the other person can easily see that tropes are appeal to some readers, whereas they repel other readers who find them cliches or boring. So tropes are story elements that repeat so many times the reader will identify them as part of either the subgenre appeal or an element to avoid. They're clearly being used differently by different reading groups. And I feel like I get the sense that YA and romance have the most visible conversations around tropes right now, with like book talk and other communities bringing more awareness to certain books, but trope conversations can show up in many reading communities, even if they don't label them as such. So if you're interested in reading more about tropes specifically, I recommend tvtropes.org. It's a website. It's a rabbit hole of information of all of the tropes you could possibly find in all kinds of media, not just reading, with examples for each one. So it's great. Tropes may come up in a conversation about reading recommendations. They can be used to help search for things or to sell the books. They can be seen as cliches, can bore well-read genre readers, but can also be remixed for additional joy. So tropes have a specific appeal to readers and may be part of how they describe their request. So next slide, please. To sum up, these words are all part of ways of giving categories to the reading experience. It involves big buckets and filters. So the big buckets will capture more of the books, of the reading experiences that could be appealing, while the filters help you narrow it down to things that are more specific. All of these are just trying to communicate what the reader wants to feel, what they want to do with the reading experience. But on the other hand, they're also used for marketing and selling the book. And occasionally, if a subgenre or a particular type of book explodes, publisher will label much more of the books available with these particular categories, and they're not necessarily appropriate. So always be a little bit suspicious of how these labels are being applied to the books. The last note is just that nonfiction also has genres, appeal factors, and tropes. And so you can use these to recommend books across both fiction and nonfiction. Thank you.
So I'm up next with Fantastic Formats and Majestic Media. So first, I'm going to give you a few book descriptions, and these are taken from the back of the books thing. So for number 1, sex, drugs, and murder in 1980s Los Angeles. Number 2, Futaba opens up to Taichi and admits she has a crush on Toma. Number 3, an empathetic portrait of a young woman wrestling with psychological and the trauma following a sexual assault. And number 4, she dreams of becoming an artist, an impossible career for a girl belonging to a noble family. These are all fairly different types of stories, and maybe they sound really interesting to you. But to me personally, no. I don't want to read any of those books. They all sound very boring to me. They're not the sort of thing I enjoy reading. And yet, I've read them, and not even for the podcast. I didn't even read them for the podcast. I read them and I enjoyed them. And 2 of them were on my best of the year list for last year for things I read. And 2 of them might be on my best of the year list for things I read this year. And there's one reason for that. And that is they're all comics. I love comics so much. I will read so many comics. I'll read so many graphic novels, and I will read them about any subject. As Anna Ferry has said, the co-host and previous presenter, you'll read literally anything if it's a comic, won't you? And this is pretty much true. I can't deny this. I've read everything from books about Japanese economics to queer erotica. And as long as it's a comic, I'm interested in reading it. And if it's not a comic, considerably less interested in doing it. And this is what I want to talk to you about, is that sometimes you can learn about genre by looking at a different format, and a format that works for you better. If you said to me, hey, Matthew, do you want to read a book, a novel about a gay dad who dates other gay dads? I'm like, I don't think so. That's not really my thing. But if you're like, hey, Matthew, do you want to play a video game about being a gay dad where you date other gay dads? Suddenly I'm interested. If it's like a visual novel, visual novels are how romance works for me. When I get to choose who I date, suddenly I'm interested in romance. If I have to read a book about someone dating somebody, not as interesting to me. And it's the same for so many other things. If you want to learn about the appeal of like maybe science and math, learning that is not something you want to read about, but watching videos on YouTube, there's so many videos on YouTube about how to learn these things that are taught by entertaining and creative people. True crime podcasts are a massive thing. And so if you're interested in learning more about true crime and what appeals to people about that, checking out true crime podcasts can be a really great way of doing that. Poetry is a thing that doesn't really work for me that well. I find it hard to understand the appeal of reading poetry. And yet listening to poets read their work out loud is a very different thing. And listening to that gives you a connection to the work, or gives me a connection to the work that I can't find from just reading on the page. And you can go on YouTube and experience so many different poets reading their work. And it can be a different way for you to understand the appeal factor of what poetry is and be able to connect to that. Horror, if you're not into horror novels, you can watch horror movies. If you want mystery and crime and things like that, there's tons of TV shows about this. There's documentaries about war and military things. You don't have to read books to understand the genres and what people like about them. There's also format specific appeal factors for audiobooks and podcasters. Some people just really like the narrators. They're like, you know what? I can listen to you talk about anything, which I don't necessarily agree with that. I think some people are like, oh, I could listen to you read the telephone book. I'm like, A, who has a telephone book? B, no, you probably can't. It's very boring. For films and TV shows, people follow actors. For comics, art can be a massive thing. I've read comics that I don't really think are that interesting, but because the art, or they're not that interesting story-wise, but the art is what makes them interesting to me. And I will read a comic because I love the art so much, because I appreciate the storytelling techniques that are being used in the comic. For games, the game mechanics can be a really big thing for people. They're like, I like how to play this. I like how I control the character, how I control the game. And that's the more important thing to them than something else. But remember, when talking about other formats, you don't have to recommend things in different formats to patrons. If someone comes up and says, oh, I really want a horror novel, you don't have to say, oh, you should watch this horror movie. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about experiencing these other formats so that you can understand what the appeal factors are. You can recommend them if they're open to that, but it's not really what we're talking about. They're about understanding why other people like the genre. And this is perhaps the most important thing about why you might want to go to other formats to find out about other genres. And that's because they're short. Do you know how long it takes to watch a TV show or watch a movie or read a comic book? They don't take that long. If it's a podcast or an audiobook, you can be doing something else. You can be washing the dishes or walking to work. We won't discuss how long video games take to play because they can take a very long time. But for everything else, generally, they're a lot shorter and they're less time commitment. You know, it's easier to read for me, it's easier to read a romance comic, a romance graphic novel than it is to read an entire romance novel. And now it's RJ's turn.
All right, thank you, Matthew. I'll briefly mention, in addition to choosing a different genre at random every month, our podcast also alternates between fiction genres and nonfiction topics. And then we have 2 months a year. We always do one romance genre, and we always do one format, like Matthew was talking about, where we look at a different format. But I'm going to be talking about more alliteration, robust reading resources for diverse discoveries. Next slide. So diversifying your reader's advisory. We diversify our reader's advisory on the podcast through exploring new genres, but we also want to diversify in the sense of exploring and promoting works by marginalized authors. We try to choose diversely in what we're reading for the show, but we're limited by availability, time, hold lists. We can only read so much in a month, and we're limited by what we can get our hands on. In 2020, we started compiling book lists for each genre we cover of works by BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color authors. And that's a resource both for those who come to our podcast as readers who are looking for recommendations, and for library professionals who listen to our show to help them diversify what kinds of books they're recommending. Next slide. So a quick aside, a lot has been written about the limits of book lists as an anti-racism tool and about the limits of the term BIPOC. And I just wanted to briefly acknowledge those and provide some links for further reading if you wanted to read more perspectives on that after our presentation. We're very open to feedback on how we approach race and racism. I also want to acknowledge we're 4 white co-hosts in a pretty white profession, and there's definitely some tensions to navigate in making these kinds of resources and in using BIPOC as a sort of catch-all term. It's the one we're using right now because it's the one that feels the most appropriate right now. And the language that we, the broader we, everybody uses to talk about race is always going to be dependent on context and may change over time. For me, ensuring my reader's advisory work is including BIPOC authors, both through these book lists for the show and in my everyday library work. It feels very important to me that I'm bringing that framework, that I'm able to identify BIPOC authors in a wide variety of genres, not just my favorites, and that I'm not, for example, ever making book displays or book lists featuring all white authors. Next slide. So how do you find diverse titles, especially in genres that aren't familiar to you? If your library has access to novelists, you've probably already heard about novelists today. You may already use it, but you may or may not know about the own voices category that you can search by. So here in this example, I searched cozy mystery, but you can search any genre or keyword, and in an advanced search, add that appeal factor, own voices. So that will return results of books by BIPOC authors, by LGBTQ authors, and by authors of minority religions. And you can then refine those results further by all of the good normal novelist tools. I'll mention there are also limits to the own voices framework. This won't return results on books by BIPOC authors, for example, who are writing outside of their own identity, even though that writing is likely still communicating something about their perspective. But it is a great tool to have, a great place to start looking for diverse titles. Next slide. So other RI research tools, for like the book list, do a lot of research just from the catalog of my own library system. And of course, that requires doing some extra investigating to find out more about these authors. Other public library catalogs, I've used them especially when I'm looking for nonfiction, which is something that like a tool like Novelist is not useful for. Just looking at libraries in other cities that are going to have a different focus area and a different collection can be really helpful. Can introduce me to some titles that I have not seen before. Specialized libraries, the Waywa Library here at the University of British Columbia is an Indigenous library, and student libraries, libraries of student resource groups for marginalized students. We have some here in BC. Some of them do have online catalogs that you can search, and some are open to non-students to visit. It's worth checking your local university and knowing about these collections if they exist. Goodreads genre tags are sometimes useful, sometimes not useful, sometimes actually misleading. But the nice thing about Goodreads is the user reviews, which can offer context on what kinds of diverse representation might be in the text. This book is rad was created by two colleagues of ours who saw a lot of resources being developed for diverse children's literature, but not so much for adult books. So they created This Book is Rad, Readers Advisory Diversity. We Need Diverse Books, of course, is one of those big resources for children's and YA literature. They also have a lot of further resources to explore, and I've linked to some there. Diverse Finds, our image here, is an Instagram account, and very recently a book. Book Riot and Smart Bitches Trashy Books are two book blogs that consistently make an effort to feature diverse titles. Smart Bitches Trashy Books being specifically focused on romance. I highly recommend both of them. And last on this slide is the Book Club for Masochists Facebook group and the Readers Advisory for Library Staff Facebook group, which we're also involved in. If you're on Facebook, which I don't blame you if you're not, some of us on the podcast just barely are, I get great recommendations from these groups, and they are a great place to crowdsource and ask questions. Next slide. I wanted to highlight a few resources for Indigenous literature specifically. Strong Nations is a distributor, which has a great wide selection. It's a Western Canada focus, but I have seen material on there from all across this land we call Canada. They have robust category tags. You can see in this example, I pulled just the block of category tags there, and some books will have even more. It's really well organized and maintained. And they also have authenticity labels on everything. So they will label if it is Canadian content, if the author of the text is Indigenous, and if the artist is Indigenous. And the guidelines for what they mean by that, how they determine that, are made available. And there's also acknowledgement that those guidelines are fluid. Quote, "This is a living document that will be updated as we grow and learn." Next slide. Indigenous publishers, I just listed a few here, but there are many, many more publishing materials, both for children and adults. There's other Indigenous run distributors as well. And I also included the American Indians and Children's Literature blog, which was started by Dr. Debbie Reese, which has its own reviews and analysis, but also has a great collection of further resources, both for discovering titles and for understanding various Indigenous issues, which can help you with assessing titles before you recommend them. Next slide. Takeaways on diversifying your reader's advisory. Number one, the books are there in virtually any genre or topic. There are BIPOC authors writing. It just might require some more creative searching to find them. Familiarizing yourself with a diversity of voices in a genre should be a part of learning about new genres. And there are tools to make these books easier to discover and assess. And hopefully I introduced you to some new ones or reminded you of ones that you want to explore.
So where can I find this fantastic sounding podcast is what we were hoping after we've talked about some of the techniques we use and how we read and what we read about. So it is available on pretty much every podcast finding place it is. We're on Apple Podcast, we're on Google Podcast, we're on Stitcher. We're not on Spotify anymore because of reasons. We don't have to go into that right now, but you can also just go to bookclub4m.com. We'll put a link to that in the chat. Which episodes should you start with? We have 149 episodes out there. We've covered over 80 different genres. And so here are some suggestions for where you might want to start with. And again, these links will be in the chat. Amish Romance came out in February. Great episode. I hated it. If you want to hear me be very upset about reading a book, you can listen to that episode. And also, this really ties back to what Anna was saying. I read, like, by the time I was 25% through that book, I knew I didn't enjoy it. And yet I read there at 75% of it, got nothing else out of it. I should have just given up. But no, because of the name of the podcast, I read the entire thing. So you get to struggle along with me. Biology is a nonfiction one, as RJ said. We alternate between fiction and nonfiction every month. And then once a year, we also act like a proper book club, and we all read the same book. And that episode for last year was Piranesi by Susanna Clark, which is a fun episode as well. And if you want to hear us go more in depth about one specific title, that's a good one to go. And now it's time. Oh, here's us. You can find us on social media. Again, there'll be links in the chat for this. And those images are just so that you know that you found the right account. And then questions. First question that we have is, do you ever worry about running out of genres? Because we've done over 80 of them so far. No, we don't. We don't worry about this. There are so many genres, so many subgenres. There are genres that exist now that didn't exist when the podcast began. And by the time we get to that, we'll, we've joked that this will never end, that we'll be going on forever. So with that, I think it's time for us to open up to questions from our audience. So yes, will the links be available afterwards in slides? Yes, I believe the slides will be shared with everybody as well.
Amazing. So folks, go ahead. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat there. We also have a list of questions, Jeff and I, from the committee that Jeff actually came up with. I'll take credit, but I didn't do them. So we can totally fill the void if folks need a few minutes to come up with some questions. One question, do you all talk this fast in the podcast?
I do. I talk very fast all the time. I'm also trying to be aware of time and that. So I try to speed through these things. Everyone else talks more slowly than me. So it's just me that you have to worry about.
It's a power punch of information. I love it.
Yeah.
I think today, with 4 of us being on one presentation, and especially with Anna's section being kind of unknown, we were trying to go fast and make sure we had time for questions. We do slow down sometimes more on the podcast.
Oh yeah, Michelle is giving us the useful hack that podcast apps actually allow you to slow down or speed up playback.
That's another benefit with looking at different formats. You can listen to an audiobook at 1.5 speed or 2 times speed. So it doesn't even take as long. Although I do advise, if you're going to do that, don't start at 2 times speed right away. Work your way up. Start at like 1.10, then go like 1.25, slowly work your way up and you'll get used to it.
We have a question from Lori asking for good resources for positive LGBTQ teen reads.
I'm just trying to think. I mean, I know like the first thing that comes to mind when I think LGBTQ books is Lambda Literary, which does an annual award, but also just does a publishing roundup every month of new stuff coming out. That would be my number one. Does anyone else have thoughts?
The podcast is primarily aimed at adult content. So we do cover YA and middle grade stuff sometimes, but most of the stuff that we look at is for adults. So I'm not, if you want specific like comic recommendations, I can probably give you some of those. But if it's not a comic, I'm not the one to ask.
So Kim from TPL suggested Dahlia Adler's blog for LGBTQ plus YA books. Kim, do you mind popping the website in the chat there if you can? That'd be great. Otherwise, I can look for it too. Oh, perfect. What a trooper. Good job, Kim.
Another blog that I adore is Casey, the Canadian Lesbrarian. She does, I think, primarily adult material, but she does do young adults from time to time.
Amazing. I just finished listening to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Waters of the Universe. I listened to it because it's performed by Lin-Manuel Miranda. So it's the sequel to like a very pinnacle LGBTQ positive book. Matthew.
No, but that's what I was talking about in the format. You listen to this because of the narrator.
100%. I mean, I like the story too, but I was definitely drawn because of the narrator. Okay, so I'm going to go from the list of questions that we have generated here. And one that I was sort of curious about, do you folks notice that there's any sort of trends in genres that you've noticed from doing the podcast?
The one trend that I will mention within genres, or maybe 2, is the emergence of new genres all the time, which is happening. The big one which I think has really come into be more prominent in the last few years, is isekai, which is predominantly on works coming out of Japan. And isekai is otherworld or portal fiction is perhaps how it's best known in English. And it's fantasy about people being transported to another world, usually a fantasy world or sometimes a science fiction world. Sometimes they're reincarnated. Sometimes they just like get teleported there, and about experiencing another world as a human from our earth, experiencing a world that has fantasy like magic and stuff like that. Those are extraordinarily popular. A lot of them are very influenced by video games. And a lot of them are in manga, comic book form, but also light novels, which are a whole thing. Books like basically kind of YA-ish fiction from Japan. So that's a big one. That development is one of the developments I've seen.
I think, go ahead, RJ.
Yeah, we had a whole chart at one point of various blank punk genres, which I feel like has been a trend maybe for a little bit longer, but steampunk obviously being the most popular one, but I feel like there's a lot of fantasy and sci-fi offshoot subgenres that are finding their own punk label. I think Hope Punk was the one that seemed the most one of the ones that seemed the most intriguing to us, which is less about like steampunk is sort of about setting and technology, and Hope Punk is much more about like tone and theme, which is interesting.
You also have solar punk coming out as a more optimistic version of cyberpunk in some ways, and silk punk as an emerging genre as well, which takes kind of like the steampunk idea, but uses East Asian culture instead as the kind of jumping off point for that. And that's definitely a genre that is emerging right now. Why do so many cozy mysteries involve food and puns? Because they're funny. There have been times in the podcast when we've ended up talking about just reading through cozy mystery titles because they're so good. They're great. What was one of the ones I encountered recently that I thought was great, so amazing, was I think was the Dim Sum of All Fears. And just like, that's so good. Dim Sum of All Fears. I can't believe how good that is.
Megan, you have any thoughts on that, on like the trends?
On the trends, one of the things I've noticed is just more now, because I'm reading more broadly in different genres, is how important covers are, and as covers change and how they sometimes latch onto a genre trend but don't like fulfill the requirements of the genre in the book, and how annoying that is.
Beautiful. Okay, I want to ask, do you think there is a specific genre that you would pick that doesn't get the respect that it deserves? I know Matthew talked about graphic novels, but maybe something more obscure that you have read that you think everyone should know about. If you say Amish romance, I may die.
Some people really like it, is what I will say. Every genre has the people that love it. And that's one of the things about is learning what people like about those genres. The genre that I think for me was most surprising that I read on the podcast, that I went in not expecting anything and ended up really enjoying, was Westerns. And I think Westerns are a genre that people don't really talk about very much anymore. Like there's a clear dedicated audience for them. And you often, like, libraries have their sections, small sections for them. But there are some really solid Westerns out there. And even if it's not something you want to read every month, there's some that are worth checking out even if you're not super interested in that genre, just really good stories.
I don't think it's obscure exactly, but I feel like romance in general is one that certainly, I think even just like 5 or 10 years ago, I think most people I knew would have like very quickly dismissed it just out of hand, when it's such a huge world of different kinds of writing and different stories. It's I'm glad to be exploring that through the show, and just to see the conversation changing about it a little, and it getting more respect now than perhaps it did not too long ago.
There's also like a plethora of subgenres of romance. like there's no one monolithic romance thing, and people are like, they really like Regency romance, or they really like science fiction romance, or they really like NASCAR romances, like whatever it is, there's some out there that people are into. Like that's one of the areas that there is a lot of Western fiction right now as well, is Western romances, which we haven't done that one on the podcast yet. Maybe next year. No, Megan doesn't want to.
No, I just said we hadn't done it yet. My pet genre is translated works. I think like 4% of all the world's fiction gets translated. And one of my deep, dark fears is I will never read all the things in the world. And so if it doesn't get translated, I'm hooped because I'm not able to learn all of the languages in the world. So yes, read more translated stuff.
I do like that Megan does occasionally talk about French language books on the podcast as well, or books that are translated into French in some cases, but that are often that are not available in English. So,
amazing. It looks like there was a question from Angela here. Recut book covers. Why do so many have characters that face away from the cover? Their thoughts about that? Why is no one making eye contact?
Go ahead, RJ.
Okay. I think part of it is just a trend. I'm thinking of like 100 mystery covers I've seen where it's like a woman walking away from the camera to like create a sense of intrigue and mystery, and where's she going and who is she? We can't see. I think part of it is probably also just like cover photography culture, where you don't show people's faces, where that is sort of associated with cheaper or less prestigious literature. You think of like romance covers, or pulp romance covers, or sort of pulpy science fiction, or that kind of thing, having a person's full face on it. And so we've just sort of been trained through years of cover design to associate that with a lower quality work, for better or worse.
I think like what Megan talked about with tropes also comes into this, like in the design of the covers. It's like the style of the cover makes you expect, like whether we want to or not, we judge books by the cover. And so the style and the trends in covers help us understand what the book might be about. So.
Jeff had a good thought here. He thought that maybe if you can't see the character's face, it could potentially be anyone, and that the reader can fill in the rest with their imagination, which I
definitely.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's definitely a thing with identification with the characters. There's a really interesting thing in Japan with yaoi, which is male romance manga comics that are created predominantly by and for women. And they're very much a kind of fantasy idea of gay relationships. And one of the reasons I've seen talked about why they're so popular is because when there's two men in the relationship, women are able to project themselves onto either person. And so they can project themselves onto the more dominant person in the romance, or the less dominant person in the romance. Whereas there are cultural expectations for how women should act that get reflected in male-female romance things that exist there, and that exists everywhere, really.
Amazing. I want to talk a little bit more about the podcast for folks who are sort of interested in that aspect of it. Can you guys tell us a little bit about what sort of tech you're using to like record and put together your podcast?
Sure. We all have these microphones, the Blue Yeti microphones. Yep, that we record with them. We just record using like video chat software so that we can see each other. And we record in Audacity, which is a free audio editing program. And then I get to edit it all together, cut out the bits where we flub something we say or mispronounce a person's name, and put it together. We pay for a podcast host where we put the podcast up every month as well. So we have to pay for that. Though it's also, you can go to YouTube, you can watch it on YouTube. Watch is in quotation marks. There's just a static image if you do it that way. Nobody really does it, but I set it up and decided not to bother turning it off. So It's the I think that's pretty much everything. What I will say, if you're interested in learning more about podcasting, there are some really great places out there to learn more about podcasting and what you want a podcast to be. I think is a really important thing. If you listen to our earlier episodes of the podcast, I'm horrified of going back and listening to those. And when people say, "Oh, I started with episode 1," I'm like, "Oh no, why did you do that? Please don't start at episode 1." I think the quality of everything was much worse. But you can learn about different aspects of what is important and what makes a good podcast. One of the major things is the audio quality, which is why we have fancy microphones. Is because if it doesn't have good audio quality, people aren't going to listen to the podcast. And so learning about things such as like doing noise removal, background noise removal levels, so that hopefully everyone is speaking at like the same level of volume and stuff like that, or how you can help make a podcast more listenable, I think. Also, and if anyone is interested in doing a podcast, my number one recommendation is do a pilot episode. Do an episode you do not expect to release to the public, but treat it as if you would, so that you can go through and find out what works and what doesn't work before you actually release something.
I wanted to add an asterisk to what you said about fancy microphones and say reasonably fancy microphones.
True.
Because we all have, I think, the Blue Yeti microphone, which is like the beginner's podcast microphone.
Yes.
I think it costs like around $100, and the pop filter that I have on here that you can see was about $10. It's worth investing in something that sounds a little better than like an onboard microphone. But yeah, you don't have to break your budget.
That's a really good point, RJ.
Amazing. I see Ellen asked a question here in the chat. How do you feel about books being marketed as one thing, but are actually something different? For example, a book that's marketed as a comedy, but is actually quite dark.
I hate it.
I hate it.
Terrible. I'm the kind of person who goes into a book blind. I will barely read like the blurb at the end.
Yep.
And so I'm gathering a lot of information from how the cover is presented, like the title, all these kinds of things. And so if you pull it's a sweet and lovely type of cover, and I'm a mood reader too. So like I read what I want to read in the moment, not like a TBR or whatever. So if you give me false signals on the cover and I go in and it's not at all, it's a horror and it looks sweet and lovely, you're a terrible person and I dislike you strongly.
Yeah.
One of the things. Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is where user reviews are so valuable, because sometimes even like reading the publisher's information about it, like the plot summary, you don't get a full picture. If they're trying to compare it to other books so that people who are fans of that book will latch onto it, but actually it's not, it only is superficially like those other things, and it's a totally different tone or whatever it is. It is worth reading a few user reviews before jumping into something or before recommending it to somebody else to see if that is wholly accurate.
This is something to think about as well in regards to like kind of the fuzzy edges of genres and how they merge into each other all the time. One of the things we've discussed in our romance episodes is like what makes a book a romance, capital R romance fiction, as opposed to a book that has romance in it. And the big thing within the romance community that I've learned from doing the podcast is that for it to be a capital R romance, it needs to have the HEA, which is the happily ever after, or at the very least, the happily for now. And which leads to kind of a really interesting thing to me within the romance world of series of books. Whereas because the person got their happily ever after in book 1, the sequel can't be about them. They've already got their happy ending. And so the sequel has to be about a different character that appeared in the first book. And so it's like a sister or a cousin or their neighbor or their friend or whoever it is. But it's like, that's how you continue the series. It's the same world, but a different person than the first one. And I think that's kind of different than some other fiction, how other genres work for serious things.
Amazing. So we have about 5 minutes left in this session. I'm going to ask, I think we talked a little bit maybe about like genre mashups,
Yep.
But I'm wondering if there were any that either really worked for you or really didn't work for you.
Trying to think of some good examples right now. And of course, when you're on the spot presenting is the moment you forget everything. My favorite romance that I read for the podcast as a book, as opposed to a romance video game that I played, my favorite romance that I read was a science fiction romance that included a lot of the romance tropes that you encounter. That if you're familiar with romance, you will understand, which is the like marriage of convenience, like there's only one bed, all of these sorts of things. But it was a science fiction romance set on a spaceship with a lesbian space station captain. And there were like lots of laser battles as well. And I'm like, oh, this is how you make me enjoy a romance novel. Amish romance, no. Laser battle romance, yes.
Yeah, I think I also find that I enjoy sci-fi romance and fantasy romance. I feel like I haven't read that many of them for the show, but generally that's a crossover I enjoy, where I think I have struggled with sci-fi and fantasy murder mystery, which often I think is one of the things that doesn't get mentioned in like the marketing. I feel like several times I've started reading a fantasy novel and then it's like, oh, there's a murder, who did it? And it's like, oh, well, I might have enjoyed this if I was sitting down to read a mystery, but I kind of wanted to hear more about magic powers and not like solve a crime scene here.
I think the thing that doesn't work for me, or most recently didn't work for me, was second person narration. I did this, I did that, and unreliable narrators. I don't like unreliable narrators. Not my thing. I think is kind of what it comes down to. I'm just like, if you tell me, I'm going to believe it, like, because I'm invested in the world. And so if you're like, oh, it could be, it's not real, I'm just like, not my thing.
Opposed to RJ, I rather enjoyed the detective novel that was actually secretly actually, I'm not sure what it was supposed to be mashed with. I think New Weird, because it was China Mayville and it was the city in the city.
There was also one I remember, which several of us read for the podcast when we did legal thrillers, was a fantasy novel that was also kind of a legal thriller. Yeah. And it was a world in which all the magic was based on legal contracts with various supernatural beings. No?
Yes, but I gave it to my partner and he said the second book is even better because we're doing book 2 for the year of 2022.
It is on my list to read as a book 2 to read this year.
He said it was better.
Great. But that's the sort of thing. And there are so many of these weird edge cases of genres that you can find if you go and look. And I think that what Anna and RJ said, when you're looking at genres and becoming familiar with genres that are popular at your library that you don't read, you don't want to read the big names. You know, you want to go and find the smaller things out there, because if someone is like, oh, can you recommend me, X, you don't want to say, oh, have you read this book that's number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list? Because they have, they've already read that.
Exactly. If you're going to put in the work, you want to find something like obscure and then tie the two things together.
And I think that also ties into like learning about the appeal factors of these things, and why we discuss that. It's like, maybe this person just really likes the main character and their style of person. They would enjoy them in a different setting, that sort of person in a different setting, or maybe they enjoyed the tone or whatever it happens to be. And that's what you're looking for. Maybe they just want to read a book about a baker and they don't care if it's a cozy mystery or a romance novel. More pies. That's what RJ wants in books.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're ending our session here almost exactly on time. I'm wildly impressed with all of you. Big thanks to Anna, who is probably on a flight right now. Thank you so much, folks, for being here today, talking about your experience on the podcast. I want everyone to take their phone out, subscribe, pick one episode to listen to. Must. We're going to get lots of thank yous in the chat here. I also am going to mention that we're going to sort of carry this conversation over to the RA community group. Jeff and I have already posted some questions about like your genre preferences. We're going to try and tie in a lot of what we talked about here today as well. So a reminder, if you're an OLA member, you've automatically been added to the group, and please look for the invitation in your email. We are going to take, oh, sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
Sorry, our next episode is 150. And so if you have any questions that were not answered here, send them to us. We're going to answer questions on episode 150. So that comes
Nice.
out next week.
Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to take a short break, folks. We will be back at 3:00 with 2 sessions. One of them is called Become an eBook Expert. That's with myself and Kat from the RA committee. And the other one is called Big Picture RA, Why It's Crucial to Prioritize and Support the Conversation. Please review this program in the Schedule document. That'd be so great. Folks, you did such a good job today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much for having
Amazing.
us.
Okay. Toodles.
Thanks, everybody.